Well, Jaime, hey, thanks again for meeting with me. Wanted to pick your brain since you are a professional. First, share a little bit about who you are, and we'll dive into a little bit about some of the best practices when reviewing the appraisal review board.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's always good to find out someone's background before you get their advice on it. So, property tax is probably one of the few things that I'm probably qualified to give advice on. Over the last 10 years, I've completed maybe 20,000 hearings, and that's what we've been doing full time. So I worked for a couple of the larger firms in town. And then in 2012, we broke off and opened up our own property tax shop, and just been working, just trying to help folks save money on their property taxes. That's basically it.
Okay, cool. It's simple, but obviously not easy. So I'm going before the appraisal review board coming up. What are maybe some suggestions you have for me or people going before the board as far as, how to be successful, and any tips and tricks you have?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. First off, kudos for protesting. It surprises me how many folks leave the value in place without ever actually challenging it. I think there's this misconception out there that there's actually an appraisal done on your property, and the counties do a really good job. It's just so many parcels that they rely on a lot of automated valuation systems, and in reality, the only way to test the value is by challenging it and seeing if it's an accurate value. And not every single time is the value going to be an incorrect value. Sometimes the valuation may be low compared to what the actual comparables are, but I think it's always worth protesting it and challenging it, especially the way the system is set up to where it's not a penalty. There's no penalty for challenging it. The property tax system invites you to be part of it and challenge the value and make sure that what's on the tax roll is correct. But yeah, so first step is making sure that you protest, and so you've gotten that. The second thing is to make sure that you're looking at the same timeline is what I would recommend. The way the property tax system is set up is more of a arrears type. A lot of folks go in there and they'll use comps from the last 3 months or so. Really what we're looking at for this year's value is the 2018 market. So you kind of want to be looking at the same timeline as everybody in the room so that your presentation will have a little more credence. Another advantage the property owner has is that they know the condition of the property from the inside out. Obviously, when we're representing property owners, we don't always know every one of the condition issues that may be part of the property. When a property owner represents themselves, and then they can have, some of the photographs or estimates or that type of thing that support any condition issues that are with the property. So that would be the two main things: is make sure you're looking at the right timeline. I would pull comps from, like yourself having access to comparables. I would pull from January 1st up until probably about March of 2019. That's the timeline that I would look at, and just make sure that you have your estimates and any pictures of condition issues.
Okay. I just pulled from last year's just to use those comps. So You're saying even this year, current homes?
There's what we're trying to. The valuation date is January 1st. 2000. Okay. Excuse me. January 1st is the valuation date that we're trying to determine. So if you go back all of 2018 and a couple of months after that, you're kind of hitting that window. So you're in the timeline. What I would avoid doing is, we're in September now, is pulling comps from the last 3 months, because those would be good comparables probably for next year's presentation, but for this year's presentation, just to be on the same page with everybody else in the boardroom, is pulling from last year.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, I'm good with that then. For the condition, I've heard that if you go and say, I have got some issues with foundation and, this and that they'll actually put it on the your appraisal, on your HCAD property information. Is that true, or
like broken slab, that type of situation? Yeah. Those are things that they weigh heavily. But it takes a little bit more than just a picture or an estimate for the foundation issues. They typically want to see an engineering report, so that's a little bit, it takes a little more work to produce. But usually what they do is, if it's a broken slab, they'll put a 10-foot square foot adjustment on the first floor of the house, and then once it's repaired, they'll put a $4 adjustment. So it's a pretty big adjustment. And they will put it on there if you can provide the correct documentation. And once it's on there, it should stay on there every year after that. And the other one is the condition issues. The appraiser that you're working with has the ability to change the condition of the property that's on the tax roll. They use a system that goes from very poor, average, good, very good, excellent. They use that type of system. And so whatever the calculation, if they see enough evidence to say let's adjust the condition of the property to below average, then the cost approach that they use will generate a new value, and that's what they'll put on the tax roll. But it's kind of really subjected to the appraiser that you're working with. They may just change the value and leave the condition alone on the tax record, or they may change it and leave it for next year as well. So.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed that too. How do they know? I mean, we remodeled our house. We opened up permits and everything. Is that the only way they know, or they just kind of guess, or
that's
what?
a big one, and that's probably the hardest thing with trying to come up with a tax roll for the whole county is if a property owner does pull permits when they're repairing the property, then they get a good idea of how much work was done, because part of the permit that the contractors puts a value in there, and so they know how much work was done, and so those are a little bit easier. They're able to put a remodel factor on it if they feel like it's enough work to consider it being remodeled.
Okay.
But the ones that don't pick up are properties that are repaired and the contractors didn't pull a permit. And so those are the ones that the little nuances on the sales where the district doesn't have information that property was remodeled. And so the MLS comps the pictures and the estimate, or the pictures and the agent wording in there comes in helpful. So you guys have this as a regular property that obviously had a total remodel done, so it's not an apple to apple comparison to our sale type situation.
Okay, gotcha. I was wondering about that. We bought ours as a foreclosure and then remodeled it, so I'm sure they have something on there. I forgot what they had on our tax record, but that's interesting to know. Okay, so obviously we've got information about the condition and then also some good comps from the tax here. I saw in there they need, I think, 4 copies of your comps. And I guess I saw that if you were going to bring something regarding the condition, it needed to be pretty extensive, like affidavits and this and that, and pretty extensive work.
I mean, usually what they'll want to see is if it's a picture, it helps for it to be date stamped. They do run into sometimes where people try to use the same pictures over and over and over, so it helps them. You're just trying to help them be able to justify it helping you. And so if you can find pictures that are date stamped around that January 1st valuation date of this year, it makes it a little bit easier for them to justify making a reduction based on the pictures and estimates. Here's another thing I see folks sometimes make a mistake is they'll take estimates of completed work. Well, in that situation, it's not really maintenance that needs to be done, and it's actually maybe the opposite. Now it's something that the property is in better condition because it's completed work. So you want to show estimates of stuff that was left undone on January 1st, the condition issues that were there. So,
Okay, gotcha. Okay, cool. I think with mine, I was probably just going to focus on just the comps and see what I can go from that one. And, maybe next year, if I don't get it, I can always kind of maybe try to renegotiate with that.
yeah.
Okay, so with their appraisal review board, I've heard that people are less successful getting a lower value. I'm sure it just depends, but it seems like you go before the informal meeting and then for the appraisal review board. What is your experience with that?
Yeah, well, so you lose a little bit of control in the formal hearing because it does become, you give your presentation and you're just kind of putting it up in the air for you have 3 members of Harris County, and they're usually older citizens of Harris County. That's not a requirement. It's just usually what you're dealing with. It's like a miniature jury.
Okay.
And it's just the human element of it. You need 2 or 3 to be more in favor of the property owner than the district. And so you have some that are historically, even though the whole process is meant to be unbiased, you have some that are historically rulings are favorable for the property owner, and some of them are historically more favorable for the county. So you really don't know what mix you're going to get when you walk into the appraisal review board. So you're just giving your presentation informally, which is a courtesy hearing. And a lot of times we feel like it's something that's we have to have. The property tax code only requires us to have a formal hearing, but most of the counties have a system where they'll try to. It just reduces the workload if we could settle a lot of these accounts informally. So when you're sitting one-on-one with the appraiser and you can get to a number that we both agree on, you have a little more control because you're talking back and forth, as opposed to the ARB. You're giving a presentation and then they deliberate, and that's the ruling. And that's also another important thing to know is it's not a final ruling. You also have options after that to seek arbitration or judicial appeal if you're not happy with the results on that.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that. It seems like once you kind of escalate, it gets a little more expensive. You need to get maybe attorneys involved, or
absolutely,
like
absolutely. So there's some fixed costs with the judicial appeal process, which unfortunately makes it tough for residential properties to justify taking those costs on. The other one is arbitration. I'm also an arbitrator with the state of Texas, and basically what happens is a third party is picked as to be the arbitrator and listen to the hearing between the property owner and the county. And the property owner puts up the arbitration fee, and whatever value the arbitrator is closer to, the other party ends up paying the arbitration fee. And so if the property owner wins the arbitration, then that fee is reimbursed to them. And it's typically around $450, $500, depending on what price point the property is at.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So thanks for bringing up the next steps. My house is a very, very simple house in Houston, but for those with like luxury properties, 750 million plus, do you find it's easier or more difficult for them to get, lower valuation?
So, you know what? I kind of feel like it's the same. The only problem that we run into is that sometimes those over $1 million properties don't always get the informal hearing. For some reason, those are scheduled directly formal. But hearing result wise, I kind of feel like percentage reduction is probably the same. It's kind of funny when we get in those higher dollars, the amount difference that we are in from the county is sometimes the same value of the whole property that we represent, for the average consumer, So sometimes a $1.3 million property, we might be at 900,000 as an opinion. So, that 400,000 is, it's a big difference. But when it comes to results, I kind of feel like it's about the same. The process is the same.
Okay. So it just depends. And okay. Let's see. Okay, so say I don't want to protest on my own. What would be the process, or how would it work if I were to hire you to?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I always tell folks, it's not that we do something that it's rocket science and you couldn't do it yourself. But I tell folks is make sure you protest it yourself or have someone there in your behalf. But don't ever just let it sit on the tax roll unrepresented, because these properties need to be checked every year. I almost feel like it's your civic duty to make sure that you protest and make sure the tax roll is right, because what happens is if the neighborhood protests together, then it puts more pressure on the next year, like, well, this property is at this amount and we should be at this amount. So it just helps everybody out. So I always tell folks, just make sure that you have someone there. And then every agency works a little bit different. Some people prefer a flat fee type setup where they pay someone, a flat fee just to be there regardless of the results. We typically like to work on a contingency fee basis, meaning we only generate an invoice if we were able to procure a reduction for you, if we were able to obtain some tax savings for you. And it's usually a fixed percentage for property owners, and it could be somewhere between 40% to 50% of the tax savings. But that's basically it. And signing up is real easy. A lot of firms have different setups, but with us, we use all electronic sign up. So it's basically just going through our website and filling out the form. And that gives us the authorization to file the protest on behalf of the property owner and then attend all the hearings for them. And we just try to make it as easy as possible. As soon as the hearing's over, we send out the results. And so it's a leverage of time to have someone there for you.
Okay. And you're saying whether it's a homeowner or whether it's you, the odds are about the same as far as getting the reduction. Other than that, maybe the homeowner knows a little bit more about the property. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair. The only difference is, we kind of, I think the advantage that we possibly have is we're able to see. It's a lot of little math calculations that the county uses, the factors that they use to drum up a value. So we're able to see where there's a little path that if we manipulate this number a little bit, it gives us a reduction. So I think we're able to see those patterns, like when we take the remodel factor off or add the CDU here or play with the numbers and depreciate this or those type of things. The other advantage is that we know, sometimes we know what appraisers are friendlier in their rulings than others. And so we're able to work with those a little bit more. And if we get someone that's notorious for not being very helpful, then sometimes we just call it a day and not work any more accounts that day. But the advantage that the property owner has is knowing the inside of the property better than we'll ever know. So the conditions that they're able to present on that. But the other thing is having access to the sales. If if you're partnered up with a realtor that can help you out pulling the comps, and I think that's a big advantage as well, because you need to have access to the MLS somehow. So like myself, I have a real estate license, but it's just for that, just to have access to the MLS sales. But that's it.
Cool. Okay. I did get the the information. They had the confidential sales information on the iFile page that I had.
Right.
Is that? I mean, obviously, I was looking at the comps and some of the numbers and information they have. Is that helpful in going through, or I mean, if I pull my own comparables, does it really matter? Just wondering.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful, because the one advantage that you have is that the county has laid out their hand. They're showing you what they're using to justify the value. So especially if you have access to the MLS, it's easier for you to dissect those comparable sales and say, well, this is what you're missing on this property. This one's not a good, comparable for this reason, or this property is on the corner or more desirable. Like, you can look through and see what it is about that property and present it in a way that you feel makes them more advantage, or a better comparable than you are, better property than you are. But yeah, and sometimes, like I said, it's not every single property is overvalued. Sometimes you'll look at that information and like, okay, these are pretty good comparables, and maybe our value's in line. And even in that case, I still think it's worthwhile to challenge it and just see, because there's a big human element involved in the process as well.
Yeah, you're right. And then there's no bad for trying. All you can do is say no, right?
Right. Yeah, the system's not meant to be punitive. So if you challenge it and it turns out that you don't win, well, I mean, you leave with peace of mind that your property is not overvalued.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, cool. So Jaime, if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, the website is where we try to direct our sign-up process as much as possible. We've found that electronic signatures has simplified a lot of our process. So if you ever go to our website, it's saveonhousetaxes.com, saveonhousetaxes.com. There's a bunch of frequently asked questions, and then there's also a sign-up now button, and it's real simple, just to plug in your information. It takes an e-signature. You can also reach us at the office line, 713-338-1655. And then our Google page is up and going. You can check us out on Google and see we have a ton of reviews on there, testimonies from other clients that we've represented, so you can see what other people's experience has been with dealing with us year after year.
Cool. Fantastic. And in case you didn't get that, we'll put that in the description below. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much. This is super helpful. So really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. Take care. If there's any other questions you have about your personal hearing, just let us know, and or just ask us, and we'll help out as much as we can.
Man, I do appreciate that. Thanks again.